Hi everybody, welcome to lesson 5 of Let's Get Knitting, and if you've made it this far, well done to you. You've done absolutely fantastic and I hope you keep up the good work. So this week we're going to learn how to do a tension swatch, and from now on every week I'm going to show you how to do a tension swatch with your new stitch, because it's very important that you have your squares all the same size. Today we're going to learn how to do the basket weave stitch. So as you can see, this stitch resembles a basket. So this stitch incorporates the purl stitch that we did last week and the knit stitch. I've cast on 20 stitches, and the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to knit 4 stitches in the knit stitch. Once I have the 4 stitches complete, I'm then going to bring my wool to the front of the needle and I'm going to knit 4 purl stitches. Then bring your wool to the back of the needle and knit 4 plain stitches. Then bring the wool to the front of the needle and knit 4 purl stitches. So this is the pattern that you follow. So it's knit 4, purl 4, knit 4, purl 4, and you continue on this for 4 rows. You can recognize the knit stitch by the X's pattern, and the purl stitch has a rounded knit stitch at the top of the needle like a pearl, and you can easily count the rows in case you get lost. So what we're going to do now is we're going to do the opposite of what we did at the start. So this time we're going to purl 4 and knit 4. And what this does is it creates a pattern, the basket weave pattern. So you're purling into your 4 stitches. And then you're going to bring the wool to the back of the needle and you're going to knit 4 stitches. So bring the wool to the front of the needle for purl. And to the back of the needle for the plain stitch. And if you kind of lose your way halfway through it, if you look at the stitches, remember that the purl stitch is rounded and the knit stitch is like an X. So if you're on the first row of the opposite pattern, you're knitting into you're purling into your knit stitch and you're knitting into your purl stitch. It's best to write out the pattern though as you go so you don't get confused. So you continue that for another 4 rows. Purl 4 and knit for 4. Now that we have the square complete, we're going to cast off our stitches. So you always cast off in the sequence of stitches that you've knitted. So to begin with, we're going to knit 2 stitches, and we're going to pull the first stitch over the second stitch to cast off. Then we're going to knit another stitch, and we're going to do the same process again. Pull the first stitch over the second stitch, and one more knit, and you're going to pull the first stitch over the second stitch. Now we're going to purl. So you're going to purl your first stitch, and then you're going to pull your first stitch over your second stitch. You're going to purl again, and pull your first stitch over your second stitch. Sometimes it's easier to use your hands to pull the stitches off instead of trying to use the needle. As you can see here, I'm finding it quite tricky, so I end up using my hands in the end. It doesn't matter how you get there, as long as you get there. Isn't that the main thing? So then you're going to purl your 4th stitch, and once again you're going to take the first stitch over the second stitch, and then you're going to go back to your knit stitch again, and you're going to continue with your knit for 4, and then you're going to go back to your purl, and it continues like that. And here is the finished square. So here is the original square that I started off with for my blankets, and it measures 14 centimeters by 14 centimeters. So the reason we do a tension swatch is so that we can get the same size square every time we do a different pattern. So I'm just going to show you why it's important. This is the basket weave knitted stitch that I did earlier, and as you can see, I knitted 20 stitches across, which is the same as this square here, but because the basket weave has a different stitch, it's a lot smaller than the original square. So that's why you need to do a tension swatch every time you knit a different stitch. So this is the little tension swatch that I have done for the basket weave stitch. So the stitch is made up of 8 stitches, 4 knit and 4 purl. So that's the amount of stitches that I need to do for a tension swatch. And I've done 8 rows as well, just to make it into a square. So the first thing you need to do is measure the width of your square and then the length of your square. So the width of my square is 4 centimeters. And I know that the width of my original square is 14 centimeters. So what I do is I divide 14 centimeters by 4, and that gives me 3.5. So then I go and I multiply 3.5 by 8 stitches, which is the amount of stitches that I have put onto my tension swatch. So that gives me 28 stitches. So that's how many stitches I need to cast on. So then to find out the rows, you do the same thing. You divide 14 centimeters by 4, I get 3.5, and then I multiply it by 8 rows, which is how many rows I've knitted on my tension swatch. So that gives me 28 rows. So I know that I need to knit 28 stitches and 28 rows, and that will give me the exact same size square as my original square here. And it actually works out well, because 28 stitches is the exact amount I need to use for my swatch, because it's a multiple of 4 stitches. So if it was 27 stitches, it wouldn't work out. I'd have to make it to 28. So 28 divided by 4 is 7, which works out perfectly. So last week we discussed how to plan out your blanket. And here's my one here. If you recall, I said I had a lot of different wools I needed to use up. So here's my plan. And here is the bundle of squares I have done so far. So remember though that it's not about the end result, it's about the process. So if you have any questions about what we did today, please feel free to put your questions into the comments box below the video and I'll get back to you as soon as I can. So have a great week and I hope you get up to loads of knitting and I'll see you next week. Bye bye.